Hey everybody. All right, we are going to start using Mongoose now to query through our actual database. So in the previous lessons, we've installed MongoDB. We have it connected now using Mongoose to our local host server. And in the previous episode, we opened up the movie model and created this blueprint. So now we're going to use this model to start querying our database. So this one is just going to be covering the GET request. How do we swap this out and start querying for actual data? Now we won't have any data yet because we won't be using this, but very soon we will cover the POST request so we can start adding data as well. Okay, so what changes do we need to make now that we're using an actual database? Well, on our server file, there is actually nothing we need to change. This is all set up and ready to go to actually start querying our database. Our model is set up as well, so the only thing we really need to edit now is our router. The first thing that's going to go is this. We don't need this data anymore. We're going to go and put this in our actual database, so that will go away. Additionally, we have a database now. I know I've said that, but we don't need this anymore. We don't need to create our own IDs. MongoDB will do that for us, so that's gone as well. All right, so we've removed the data, removed UUID, but we now need to bring something in. And if you recall from when we talked about Mongoose models, this is the thing that we're going to use to actually look for movies in our database. So we need to import this model that we're exporting from this file. So in my movie router, I will say const movie, capitalizing it to denote that it is a model, and I will say require it from ... my own models folder, the movie model. Okay, so now I can use this variable to create movies, get movies, post movies, delete movies, what have you. So let's work on this get all route first. We no longer have movies, we no longer need this, we'll just empty it out, but the route syntax stays the same. We do want to make sure though that we're adding in next to all of these middleware functions so that we can pass errors in case one occurs with our database. Now the first method we're going to cover is one for finding movies in a database. So this is what we'd use for get all or getting a specific subsection that we'll see in further videos. But all of these methods we're about to learn are Mongoose methods, so we use them on Mongoose models. All right, so method number one, this is the first one we'll learn. It is movie.find. Notice there's a lot of suggestions here of things that we can do. We'll cover a bunch of those in time. Right now we're just going to do find, and it is a method, so we call it. And this is the standard syntax for any Mongoose query when interacting with MongoDB. We'll say movie.find, and then we can pass multiple arguments into here, but eventually we need to pass in a callback function, like so. Now this callback function comes back with one of two things. This movie.find, this goes and talks to the database. So this is asynchronous. This is using promises just like Axios. This will go to the database, and either it'll run into an error and send us that, or it will find the movies and send that back. So we need to account for either of those eventualities and say it'll come back with either an error or the movies I was looking for. And again, these are just parameters, so I can name them what they want, whatever I want. But the first one will always be the error if it exists, and if not, the second argument will always be the data that we're requesting with our method. So it is a node convention that you handle errors first, because if one occurs, we want to catch it and handle it. If we don't do that, node will crash and let us know an error occurred. So we always have to handle our errors first. So in all of our routes, we'll ask, if there was an error, so if error, let's set the status to a server error status, and then let's return next our error. If you recall, next will pass this error over to the server, catch it in our error handler, and send it to the front end. So we already have all that set up from previous episodes, but now we're sending an actual error that occurred when querying the database. So that's great. Now if an error didn't occur, then that means we got the movies we were expected. We got the data that we're trying to query. So I'll say return res.status 200 and .send the movies. All right, so there's our first Mongoose route or Mongoose query to our database, and that is done. That should be all that we need to do, other than, of course, testing it. So I'm going to start up my server here. Note I'm on server.js and connected to the database. Okay, and I'm going to practice on getting this get all route, but think to yourself for a moment, what might I get back? If you recall, there's no movies in the database yet. So how does MongoDB handle that? If it doesn't find anything that matches it, what does it do? Well, let's go ahead and test it here. We'll hit send. And there we go. Empty array. This is what we want to see. This means our query was successful. Our code ran successfully. It did what it needed to, and it said, hey, we looked for movies in the database. We understand it's a collection. There's just no objects in it yet, so here's your empty array. But as long as one movie exists in the database, we'd get back an array with an object in it, or multiple objects in it. So that's the goal of the next video. We're going to work on the post request and start adding movies to the database. So the first goal is to get all routes set up, right? And do your movie.find or whatever your model is .find to get the entire collection back. Make sure you're handling your error and sending the response with the status code, and then go and test it in Postman. As long as you get an empty array back, you know your endpoint is working and it is actually interacting with MongoDB. So once we have that, we can move on and start adding items to our database. So get this implemented in whatever exercise or assignment you're currently working on, and when you're ready, join me in the next episode.